Welcome to Building Research Relevance. My name is Stephen Shaw. I'm the interim chair of the Department of Educational and Counseling Psychology. At least chair for another about 2.5 months, and then I turn that position over to someone else, which is exciting. Okay, today what we're going to talk about in Building Research Relevance is just a few things concerning artificial intelligence and especially generative AI, specifically large language models. We're not going to talk about all the aspects of the construct of artificial intelligence because it's such a broad term, it almost loses meaning. But we're going to talk about large language models, how and why and if you should use that as you generate scientific knowledge, and how is this relevant to being a more relevant researcher, which is the theme of all we're talking about in this session. First of all, the artificial intelligence is everywhere. Google's replaced its search engine with an artificial intelligence. Almost anything you go on, someone's asking you if you want an artificial intelligence support. And my view is kind of back off Clippy, fancy Clippy. It's not really that useful. But we have to remember it's everywhere. There's a lot of people talking about how it can improve the report writing for psychological reports, that it's a time saver, that it's a productivity improver, and it's an insight gatherer. We've heard a lot of these sorts of things. I have my own views on it that seem to be, I don't know if they're minority or Luddite or what it is, but I'll just kind of give you my views on how artificial intelligence can be used to make research more relevant. Just to give you kind of the gross definitions, artificial intelligence is the broad, encompassing term. It just deals with intelligence machines that can integrate knowledge. Below that, a subgroup of that is machine learning. It's a subfield of AI, and it focuses on pattern recognition in data. So this is really great because once you can recognize patterns within data, you can apply that pattern to new observations. And so that's kind of a nice approach that could potentially have some utility for theory building and theory testing. I haven't seen it used that way very much, but it could be. Then there's another concept that we see a lot with large language or large data sets, which is deep learning. That's kind of within machine learning, and it focuses on unstructured data. This can include text, images, matrices of numbers. It can do a lot of things. And this relies a lot on artificial neural networks. The approach is basically inspired by human cognition. So that's where you see a lot of human cognition and computational neuroscience come together to help inspire deep learning. I see that as sort of like those movies that say they're based on a true story. They're somewhat based on the human brain. I would call it a loose inspiration of human cognition models. Nonetheless, deep learning's there and it's helpful. Within that is the large language models, and that's what we're mostly used to when we see ChatGPT and similar models. These deal with text specifically. So that's the focus of what we want to talk about because we have a lot of people who are talking about using ChatGPT and related models as how this is. So what we have to think about, and just the gross idea of what these large language models do, is they begin to train neural networks, the large language model, to predict the next word in a given sequence of words. So no matter if that sequence is long or short, in German, in code, even if it's old school ASCII code or BASIC, it will predict the next logical thing. Or if it's Python or something like that, or if it's Danish or whatever, it doesn't matter. It will predict the next possible thing, whether it's a poem, a snippet of code. It really develops these sequence based on information, based on the last word. So it really just produces the next word that's the most logical based on the context of the language. So that's all it does. It predicts the next word. And if you have a large enough neural network with enough data, the large language models become really good at predicting what the next word's going to be. Is that perfect? No, of course not. It doesn't happen. Is it really good? It really depends on how it was trained. But mostly you'll get information that is syntactically and semantically completely appropriate. You can do a lot of fun things about those. My view of large language models and the use for creating relevant research has changed quite a bit. For a while, I was using it to generate ideas, asking it simple questions, which is great. Then I started using it less. I kind of got off of that and really didn't use it very much. But I did use it as a grammar check. And so I would just put in, correct for grammar and expression, or grammar and clarity is the phrase I used a lot. And it would rewrite what I wrote with grammar and clarity. That's what I used to. I now don't use it at all. I really try to avoid any use of large language models in my work. There's a few reasons for that, and I'll give you my reasons, and then I'll give you one good reason why we should consider using it. But for me personally, I've just stopped using it, and I do not use it. In fact, I had an interesting thing. I wrote a review for a manuscript and prepared it and submitted it. And one of the things they had you check before you submitted it was a phrase of, I promise that I did not use large language models or artificial intelligence in the preparation of the review. I'd never seen that before, and I wonder how many people get stuck on it. But in this case, I felt a little superior because I certainly didn't use it. But here's why I'm kind of against using large language models. I shouldn't say that. Why I don't use it. Everyone makes their own decision. First of all, it upsets me quite a bit that the papers and books that I have published with various for-profit publishers, Elsevier, Sage, Taylor and Francis, they sold their catalog to artificial intelligence to be used for teaching. Pretty much they've profited from the work that many authors have done, mine and other people's. And if you look carefully, if you have an artificially intelligence created or an LLM created manuscript, if you look carefully, you might see some turns of phrase that you use that are kind of specific to you. You will see things that you've written in the past there in these manuscripts that are related to your field of study. Why we really shouldn't use it is multiple-fold, but I'll give you the big ones. One, I'm kind of ornery about publishers making millions of dollars, as if they don't make millions already on free labor. But some of the reasons are, if you're using large language models to generate anything in science, you're probably engaging in plagiarism, unknowingly and anonymously. That's the hard part, is you have no idea if you plagiarized or not, because it's scraped articles from me, from you, from everybody who's published, and it kind of puts them in a mash, and that teaches the large language models how to predict the next word. And if you're in a smaller field of study, you recognize the pros of some of the major contributors to that field. So if you're using it to generate any text, the chances are really good you're plagiarizing, and you may not even know it. Which is the worst. I mean, plagiarizing intentionally, okay, that's, at least you know it. You know not to do it. But if you're using AI, even for grammar checks, you are using the tone and the text of other people, or something that's been trained by other people, and that's problematic. Second is, and this is more of a philosophical thing, but it establishes the prejudices and biases that appear in the text data that the model learns from. It establishes and deepens those biases. In other words, if there's problematic research out there, it will influence what that next word will be in a large language model and carve biases, whether they're explicit or implicit. It carves them in stone and begins to regenerate those through every iteration, every single request for large language models. It takes that bias that's out there in the world and can concentrate it into the answers that it gives. Next one, and this is related, is this reliance on AI, especially ChatGPT and some of the others, tend to be proprietary. There's even a couple that say they're open source, and they're not. Or say they're open access types of open source types of algorithms, but they're really not. We have no idea what biases and what controlled messages are being inserted into the system with potentially nefarious means and goals. And we know that the CEOs of some of the AI companies are politically problematic at best for many of us, or let's just say they're at least on one side of an issue, and it will influence how we do because we have no idea what algorithms are used to predict the next model. Like I say, I used it for grammar and expression, but when you do that, anytime you contribute a story or contribute a probe, you're actually feeding the beast. You are giving it more information to scrape from. You're fueling this power and control of a few people who own artificial intelligence companies. I know that sounds sort of, I don't know, kind of like I'm some kind of a communist hippie or something, but I think it's been pretty evident that some of the people in charge of these have means that may not be particularly good. The other thing is large language models have absolutely zero need to be accurate. It's just the highest probability that the next word is correct. It's essentially a bullshit generator. And it sounds great, it looks great, the context is good, but it's just garbage. And if you look carefully, and it takes a while to look carefully sometimes, you see errors, and you see problems, and you see errors of fact. If we're authoring scientific papers, we really have a obligation to be credible, relevant, and our facts need to be accurate. Now, I have no problem with actuarial approaches to decision making and things of that nature, but the truth is, AI is simply, or large language models are simply BS generators. If they're accurate, it's by coincidence. So, and I do appreciate, the fact that I always get at is, for many authors of scientific papers, they're not going to see a difference when they use large language models because they're pretty much human bullshit generators anyway. So maybe they won't notice a difference. The next thing, it's kind of a philosophy of making research relevant, which is AI is extremely good for producing papers. It helps you produce them faster, more just get stuff out quick. But it's not good for scientific advancement. So those are two things. Remember, our incentives are really for paper production. So there's an incentive to use large language models. But as we've talked about in all of these sessions, if we're going to improve science, large language models are not really particularly good. If there's anything good potentially out of using large language models in science, it's that diverse areas of study, diverse fields of study can be brought together and integrated in ways that most people don't have an opportunity to engage in. You can throw in methods from one field and use them in another field, and that's often how advancement takes place. So there is some potential there. But in my next episode, I'm going to talk about how we can do that without using artificial intelligence. And I have a whole method that I'm going to be working on actually in the next few weeks to create a model that helps us to get diverse areas of study together without using artificial intelligence. So when it comes to large language models, I'm afraid I'm just not there yet. I tried it. I think there's some cool things about it. I mean, it's really fun to send an invitation to a department meeting and ask it to write the invitation to the department meeting in rhyming couplets or silly things like that. But even then, you're still feeding the beast. So why would you even do that? So I could be swayed that large language models could produce positive research if things can be changed. Right now, I think there's too many risks, too many problems. I know people are under huge pressures of academic incentives that should just produce a lot of papers. AI will definitely help with that. But this is not, right now, a positive development in scientific advancement. There are some positives to it. I'm not denying that. But I strongly suspect that that's never going to happen, that we're never going to have a situation where large language models can truly help with science. At least not as they are now and not as they're typically used. So from me, you're probably going to be continuing to expect slow, artisanal, organic words that have been typed from my fingers or dictated. I do dictate sometimes. So that is where we are right now. So I'm not a supporter of it. I am very dubious when I see large language model papers, and it is kind of hard to tell sometimes. Mostly it's hard to tell if it's a large language model generated paper or if it's just BS. It could be both. It's like on the old Twitter, when you're on X, it's hard to know if it's just an idiot or a Russian bot. Why not both? But I think that's where we are with large language models too. They're just kind of the bots of the academic world. So this is one more area that right now, the way things are used, large language models simply add to the lack of credibility of research and the lack of relevance. If we're going to build research relevance, either this has to improve and change significantly, or we need to find another way. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you next time on Building Research Relevance.